On Monday, August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., most people in Hiroshima, Japan, were on their way to work. The residents of Hiroshima were quite happy with the state of their city, as it had remained largely untouched while many other Japanese cities were devastated during World War II. You should know that World War II had already ended in Europe, with Germany having surrendered, but the Japanese were still not ready to give in. As a result, Japanese cities were bombarded daily, not just with ordinary bombs, but with incendiary bombs that are now considered illegal. Yet, Hiroshima remained intact, and its people continued with their daily lives. It was 8:15 a.m. on a sunny summer day. A minute later, at 8:16 a.m., the sun in the sky appeared to double. Why? Because the bomb wasn't allowed to hit the ground. When the bomb was 600 meters above the ground, the trigger for detonation was activated. They did this to ensure that no energy from the bomb would enter the ground directly. Most people in the city died instantly, but those who were farther away and witnessed the scene described it this way: the ground was shaking nonstop, the sound of breaking glass was everywhere, and the air had become extremely hot. Shattered glass was flying around, causing many of the survivors to be injured or killed by these fragments. Some people, their faces and bodies torn, were still alive. Breathing was incredibly difficult because dust and debris filled the air. They tried to cover their mouths with their clothes to get some air. Standing upright was almost impossible, the dust was too thick to breathe. Breathing was only possible within 20 centimeters above the ground, so everyone lay down. The ground was so hot it burned their skin, but it was better than suffocating. The ordinary citizens were just trying to find a place where they could breathe easily, but such a place was hard to find. Those who were about 2 kilometers away from the explosion had a better situation. They could breathe, and the explosion had only shattered windows. Now, what did those within 2 kilometers say? Those standing by the windows died. The old windows had glass panes that turned into daggers, killing anyone behind them. But those who weren't by the windows and survived said they heard a very powerful explosion and then saw a huge mushroom cloud rising into the sky, made of smoke and fire. 90% of Hiroshima was built of wood, which is why it was leveled to the ground. Only the old, solidly built brick buildings remained standing, and some of these still exist today. The modern brick and cement buildings, if not built properly, were also reduced to rubble. The only people who survived close to the explosion were those inside the sturdy brick buildings. Interestingly, these sturdy buildings that survived the explosion are preserved as historical relics. After the explosion, if anyone went near the blast site, they wouldn't find bodies, just skeletons. The intense heat had vaporized any flesh. Those who ventured near the site also had a high risk of cancer due to the radioactive contamination. People didn't know at the time that it was an atomic explosion with severe contamination. But despite the danger, those who could went to help. Most of the survivors aimed to reach the river, hoping it would be cooler there and they could breathe more easily. The bomb had raised the temperature to over 50 degrees Celsius, and there was no water to drink. Some wanted to reach the river to cool down and drink water. The ash and smoke from the explosion slowly rose, and after an hour, it began to rain. But not the rain we know, this rain had acidic droplets. The rain turned everything it touched black. The acidic clouds mixed with ash made the rain look like it was pouring black oil. The radioactive contamination was still affecting the area, but people were unaware. They didn't know that every breath they took was filled with a deadly substance. Let's see what happened by the river. People who reached the river found the water extremely hot, but they jumped in without thinking. It cooled them down and provided relief from the intense heat. The black rain also fell into the river, further contaminating the water, but people didn't care. They just wanted to cool down and quench their thirst with the contaminated water. Unfortunately, many who drank the water and survived the explosion later died within a month due to radioactive poisoning. Everyone near the explosion died one by one within 2 months, but a small percentage survived to tell their stories. Those closest to the blast died instantly. These accounts come from people who were at a distance. 135,000 people died in the city that day. The US government told Japan, "You've seen the bomb, surrender and end the war." Japan responded, "No, you don't know how to make bombs, this was a divine calamity." The US warned, "Don't take it lightly, we will strike again." Japan replied, "Do whatever you want." 3 days later, an even more powerful bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Nagasaki was smaller and less populated than Hiroshima, so 64,000 people died there. After this explosion, the Japanese government realized these were actual bombs and that a third bomb was on its way. Interestingly, a third bomb was ready because they thought the Japanese wouldn't surrender after the second one. After the Nagasaki bomb, Japan surrendered, and World War II ended with the defeat of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. It's interesting to note that China was on the Allies' side during the conflict in East Asia, working with the Americans.